want to welcome everybody here. I'm Barbara Fankhauser. I'm the president of the Portland Storytellers Guild. And thank you. As you know, this is a benefit for Artichoke Music. They had a break-in last December, and we love this place. And I just, are there people here who, besides storytellers, who have performed on this platform? If you have, raise your hand. Anybody out there? Musicians at all? There's one in the back. Yay! So you know how special this place is, and it's just, it's the perfect setting for nice, intimate evenings like this. And so I'm so happy to see all of you here supporting the beautiful place that we have. And I want to thank each of our volunteers. This is all volunteer run, just like the Guild, the Storytellers Guild. There's so many little places like this that depend on their volunteers. And so I want to thank Olivia on sound. Hey. And Carly is on video back there. Carly, yeah. Christopher is our bartender. And Steve is at the door. He greets everybody. So yeah, thank you all you guys. They're just fabulous. And so I just want to mention, it is a benefit, so when we will have an intermission, and you can all go over there and purchase things from Christopher, and it all helps Artichoke. So just saying that. Also, I want to say that to our video audience. We have people out there in virtual land watching this live stream, and don't forget, it is a benefit, and you can make donations at the Storytellers website that will go to Artichoke if you haven't already. So just let you know. Thanks. Now I want to just tell you also, one of our storytellers, Maura Doherty, her husband Ken is here, and Ken built the bars on the doors on this door and this door after the last break-in to protect. I know. Is that great? So that was his gift to Artichoke. So thank you very much, Ken.
You're welcome.
Okay, so just housekeeping, please turn off your phones if you haven't already. And I just want to say, if anybody doesn't know this, restrooms, there's a restroom here. We recommend you not use it during performances, or we will stop and wait and applaud when you come out. But if there's two others, so you can safely use during performance. Go out, turn left, and then there's one up the stairs, or just past the stairs to your left as well. So there's 3 restrooms. And now I want to introduce our tellers and our musician for the first half. Katie Osik is our talented musician. This is a kind of a new thing. Thank you, Katie. I've been wanting to combine music and storytelling for a long time, and so tonight we're actually going to do that. We have a lovely musician. So thank Katie. And then our storytellers in the order of appearance, we have Steve Henniger and Maura Doherty. Maura also just wrote a memoir of, I want to say your escape from being a nun, but maybe that's not right. Yes? And then Gretchen Peterson, come on up, please. So without further ado, I will turn this over to Steve Henniger, our first teller.
Evening, everyone. I am Steve Henniger, and I'm really glad we could gather this evening to celebrate the changing of the seasons. Because in Oklahoma, which is where I grew up, we had 4 distinct seasons. First, the tornadoes of spring, which would give way to the blistering heat and burn lawns of summer. And then finally, the winds across the plains would tear the coloring leaves from the trees and raise so much dust that it only settled on the icy roads of winter. Now, I don't know about you, but I think there must come a time in our lives, usually when we're younger, when we begin to ask ourselves whether there might be some better place to live than where we grew up. Right? And along with that, who might teach us the survival tactics to make it through each of those seasons? And I'll tell you who I turn to. I turn to my ancestors, the raccoons. Okay. For example, right now I have a home here in Oregon where the overcast skies of fall give way to the overcast skies of winter, which in turn give way to the overcast skies of early spring, where deep in our depression from lack of light, we're likely to lash out at our loved ones. But with the first clear sunlight of spring comes hope and the raccoons. They would come body surfing out of the hills on the snowmelt until they tumbled into my suburban front yard re-energized. They would shake themselves, hitch up their board shorts, and then scamper off to try to intimidate the squirrels that were just trying to hang out beneath the bird feeder. And seeing all of that energy, I bought board shorts. I body surfed out of the hills on the snowmelt to tumble into my suburban front yard reborn. There was something about that rush of that icy body surfing that lifted my depression, and I was saved. And the raccoons led the way, not for the first time. Prior to that, I lived in North Carolina, lovely and warm and constantly thrashed by hurricanes. But it was there that I learned first how man and nature could work together. Now, during the first season of the storms, I was just a little ways from the coast, and I discovered that I had a family of raccoons living under my house. And as that first big storm came in, I found myself nailing plywood up on my windows of the house there, working side by side with the raccoons, who seemed to feel they had a stake in my house as well. Now, I was new at this. It was my first big storm. I had absolutely no idea whether that plywood would stay up or not, but fortunately, one of the older raccoons took me aside. And he showed me the nailing pattern that would hold the plywood up against the house. He made me run through it 2 or 3 times to make sure I had it down, and then he wandered off to work with his crew. And when I looked up down my street, I could see all of my neighbors working side by side with the raccoons, preparing for that storm. And as the storm surge came in on the coast, and surf rose higher than we'd ever seen before, instead of retreating from the coast, the raccoons hitched up their board shorts and scampered down to the beach. And I knew then that though they may be wise in survival tactics, they would never be domesticated. Prior to that, I lived in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which was the first place I ever lived where in the winter, when you'd breathe in, your nose hairs froze, which was a surprise to me. Right? Now, Minnesota was the first place I had lived after I grew up in Oklahoma, and after the tornadoes and the heat and the constant winds, and armed with a job offer. I moved from Oklahoma up to Minneapolis in the fall of the year, and the winter came on, the snow came down. Now in Oklahoma it gets cold, the wind will cut through you like a knife. But it doesn't snow like it does in Minneapolis, and it came down, it piled up thigh deep. I got so excited. I put on my new parka and I wandered out in my front yard there in northeast Minneapolis. I looked out at all that snow and I took a deep and joyful breath. I went, and my nose stiffened. I didn't know what had happened. I thought maybe my nose had had a stroke. But fortunately, one of my neighbors happened to be out there shoveling her walk and saw the look on my face, came over to see what was up, and I began to explain to her what was going on. She just slapped me on the shoulder, told me not to worry about it. It's just one of those things that happen. You come up out of a warm, moist house, and then you breathe that dry, cold air, and naturally things will freeze up. And I was feeling better when she went on. She said, usually there's no problem. And then she looked down at her feet. She couldn't even see there in the snow. Said, the only real difficulty you might have is you come up out of a real moist house, and then you breathe that dry, cold air, and naturally you have a problem with expansion as things freeze up. But don't worry. So we haven't had any more than 1, 2, 3 reports this year of exploding noses. And by that time I had my hat over my nose and I was headed for the house. Being a neighbor, she just followed me in, told me she was just kidding. But she did show me how to take a handkerchief and you flip it around into a tube. And then you tie that under your nose and behind your head. And you wear that for the first 10 minutes you're in the house so your nose will have some place to thaw. You understand? And that was the first survival tactic I learned after leaving Oklahoma. And the solution there was so straightforward and so familiar, I just couldn't help asking her whether we might have shared ancestry. And she was a little taken aback, so I had to explain the raccoon connection. But she was not offended. In fact, the handkerchief hack she had learned from the raccoons in her neighborhood. When we were out there shoveling our walks, you could see them bouncing from snowdrift to snowdrift, their little dark masks and bright white handkerchiefs tied around their snouts. Now, ever after that, whenever I would move to a new home, in the evening, just as the light was falling, I'd go out in the backyard with a beer, pop it open, settle in, take the lid off my trash can, and as the ancestors gathered, I would begin to regale them with all of the stories and all of the survival tactics that they and their cousins had provided me over the years, and partway through that narration, they would stop, look at each other, then look at me, and then hitch up their board shorts and scamper off, just shaking their heads in disbelief. That's right.
Look at that. Excuse me. Very unprofessional. My name's Katie, and I'm singing tonight. I hear that that's not a common occurrence at these things, so thanks for being here. I tried to collect a lot of songs that are about the seasons, so here's one of them. Your fingers brush my outline. Am I hungry or queasy? I estimate the way this might end. Your hand on the tip of my neck. Should I be fearing for my life? Trust can't be built in a week, still I tried. You're so easy, but I said that last time. No problems, but I guess there's next time. There's always next time. Tiny gaps between the late nights. And then I'm late for my classes. It's like no one's here to regulate my schedule. Oh my God, what's stopping us from marrying tomorrow? Or when the hydrangeas are blue again next year, or when our shadows are longer, if we're both still here. You're just easy, and I didn't mean it last time. No problem, but I guess there's next time. There's always next time. There's always next time. Women aren't really supposed to want things or give out extra feelings. Well, it's too late for me now. Oh.
What a wonderful way to tell stories. Thank you, Katie. That's fabulous. So I am Maura Doherty, and yes, I wrote a memoir that we'll be selling at the back, and we'll be donating some of those proceeds back to Artichoke. She blooms, finding home after the convent. And this story that I'm going to tell tonight is not in here, so you've got a private viewing. And this is also available at your local bookstores and on bookshop.org. So some years after I left the convent, when I was in my young 30s, I took a risk. A man I barely knew. I had met him for dinner in Seattle when I was living in Nashville. I was in Seattle looking at schools of public health, and we had dinner together and talked on the phone after I got back to Nashville. And he called me one day and said, I want to invite you to a hiking and camping trip at Yellowstone National Park and the Grand Tetons. My first thought, Maura, you don't know this man. Why would you do that? My second thought, Maura, Yellowstone National Park and the Grand Tetons. I said yes. I flew from Nashville with my day pack and my water bottle and my new hiking boots and met him in Boise, Idaho. Yes, new hiking boots. Yeah, and those of you who take any walks in hiking boots know that was a very poor decision. But you know what? Taking a risk means sometimes your heels get blisters. That's the way I look at it. So we got together and he packed up all the camping gear that he donated to our trip and got in the car and started driving, and the car started sputtering and spattering and broke down in Twin Falls, Idaho. Not even part of the way to Yellowstone. And I thought, you know, we've all had car troubles. There were mechanics in those days. He pulled in, we had no cell phones, but the mechanic said, sure, I can work on it, but it's going to take a couple days. And I looked at Bruce and he looked at me and he said, oh man, I don't know. And I could see him kind of revving up. Oh, I thought, Maura, Yellowstone, the Grand Tetons. He went and used the mechanic's phone. Mommy, my car broke down. I don't have any money. Can I use your credit card to rent a car and pay for my... Oh, Mommy, thank you. And I thought, oh, I am doomed. I mean, this is not good. And I thought, I am not getting involved in this. Anyone who, basically he was a medical student working in Boise as an intern, and I thought, what the heck? The guy is a mama boy. And I mean, I know he was probably poor, but so was I. I was barely earning an income. But we got back in this rental car. He hired it out, and we drove into Yellowstone. And I thought, Maura, you're in Yellowstone National Park. And there we were. Gushing geysers. Oh, I had been learning all about geothermal power, but this was stunning. But my favorite, the boiling mud pots. I mean, these bubbles coming up from the power of the earth. I was entranced. It was fabulous. We spent several days there and then got back in the car. Bruce was driving to go down to the Jackson Hole, Wyoming, go visit the Tetons. I'm like, I'm getting there. I'm going to make it to the Tetons. I've made it to Yellowstone. I'm going to make it. He peeled out of that parking lot. It was like he was a kamikaze pilot, screeched out, and anyone who's been to Yellowstone knows that road is clogged. I mean, it's July 4th, 4th of July. The man is just nuts. And he's passing in no passing zones. He's passing those big tour buses. He's trying to get bison out of the way. I mean, the man was nuts. So I'm from the Bronx. I'm very practical. I'm very down to earth, and I'm a very good driver. I said, stop the car. What do you mean? Pull over now. No, I'm not. I have to make it to this cafe in Jackson Hole because it's my favorite place. I said, pull over now or I'm jumping out of the car. You wouldn't. I crack open the door on the passenger side. He's like, He pulls over. I said, get out. We traded seats. I took the car keys and drove at the speed limit to Jackson Hole. We made it in plenty of time. And the restaurant was not even that great. It's just like Nutcase is behind the wheel. Maura, you're in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. You're in the Grand Tetons. They're right there. And sure enough, the next day, we got to the trailhead for Jenny Lake. That was 4th of July. We got there early enough. There were very few people around. I couldn't believe it. Bruce gets his pack on. You see my ice axe, he says? And I'm looking at this thing hanging from the back of his pack. I'm going to glissade down a glacier, and the ice axe will stop me from falling into the chasm. Oh, I said, have a good hike. I mean, what are you going to say? He starts running down the trail. There were two hikers who were on the trail, and he's screaming at them as he's running, get out of my way! I made sure he was well out of sight before I put on my day pack with my water and my snacks, made sure my hiking boots were fitted on my feet, and started to walk. And anyone who's been to the Grand Tetons knows the instant you step onto that trail or a trail anywhere in the mountains, it's magical. I was breathing that mountain air. And as I walked, I listened to the birds, and I just drank in the joy of being in this beautiful scenery. And then several miles later, when I got to Jenny Lake, I couldn't believe my eyes. This alpine lake sits about 7,000 foot above sea level. It had clear blue water. It was surrounded by snow. And I just drank it in. I went and sat on one of the rocks. I thought, Maura, taking a risk. Sometimes there are some iffy things that can happen, like the Bruces of the world. But you're sitting on the edge of Jenny Lake, and you are in the Grand Tetons, and you have seen those gushing geysers and the boiling mud pots of Yellowstone. And it was worth it.
I wish I had met you in the summer. What if we had gone to swimming holes in the woods, or walked through town gathering sweat between our hands? I wish I had met you in the summer. Nostalgia is a liar, but you were a holiday. Lit up my room, melting the lip balm in my pocket. I wish I had met you in the summer. Instead, I was the furnace, your blood ran kind of cold, an awkward Christmas gift you spent too much money on. Granite skin and too many coats. We both had to go home to visit our folks, but I wish I Thank you. Okay, this one's taken us into the next story. This is like the sad one. Winter comes every year, still each time it takes me by surprise. I know it's been a while, but the ache of missing you keeps me inside. We could have been more than just friends, I think, but you were a troublemaker, catching the hint that I'm a dude, a sucker, easy to fool. Could you have been so comfortable with letting the impossible play out? What to cut the ties just to watch me fall. I'd dinner in the dark and turn the heaters all the way up. And wait for the desire to write to you. And should I pretend you're dead? We could have been more than just friends, I think. We were a troublemaker, catching the hint that I'm a dupe. We were more than just friends, I know. You spent your whole life around me, just like I did with you. Happier with you.
Thank you so much, Katie. My name is Gretchen Peterson. I am a storyteller, no musician for me tonight. My story tonight is an original fairy tale. So please join me into a trance, into the land of once upon a time. Once upon a time, there lived a queen named Alexandra. She was known throughout the land for her beauty and for her long red hair. When the time came for her to marry, she sent an invitation to all the princes in the land. "Send me a gift, and from your gifts I will choose my husband." Many magnificent gifts arrived at her palace, but the one she chose was quite simple. A clear crystal vase. Inside 3 white roses, made of green glass, carved jade, porcelain, and diamonds. Imagine Alexandra's surprise when the giver of this gift was not a prince at all, but instead was a princess, Princess Charlotte. Well, Alexander took one look at Charlotte and fell madly in love, and the country rejoiced at the promise of a royal wedding. But the morning of the wedding, the evil Prince Richard, one of the rejected suitors, stalked Princess Charlotte, ambushed Princess Charlotte, and killed Princess Charlotte. Alexandra collapsed in grief. Her perfect love ripped away. From the depths of her pain, her agony, her grief, her long red hair transformed into icicles. For days and weeks and months afterwards, Alexandra paced the halls of her palace, wringing her hands and muttering over and over, "What's next for me? What's next?" Well, the heart may be broken, but it still continues to beat. and Alexandra was still the queen. As the years passed, she now became known for her wisdom and for her hair made of icicles. One bright summer day, Alexandra was the judge at the county fair. She judged the horses, the pigs, the cows, the chickens. But when she judged the flower show, she saw a crystal vase with 3 white roses. All of the pain she had squelched for all of those years came roaring back to life. She screamed and fled from the county fair. She ran all that day and into the night. The next morning she slowed to a walk on a country lane, and there she saw a curious sight. Set into the lane a square of bricks, and atop the bricks a little girl wielding a broom. Sweep, 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 sweep. But as Alexandra drew closer, she saw there was no dirt, no debris, no dust on the bricks, and she said, "Pray, child, what are you doing?" "I'm making a space for Mr. Nobody." Sweep, 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 sweep. A space for nobody. A space for nothing. In that instant, Alexandra had a revelation that the only way to rid her heart, her mind, her body, and her soul of this deep pain was to make a space for nothingness. She continued to walk on the country lane, and there ahead of her, a great forest of oak trees. She walked into the forest and sat beneath a mighty oak, her back resting against the trunk. Now, when she had fled the fair, her courtiers had followed her, and they kept vigil over her, sitting beneath the oak tree. And they stayed there all night and into the next day. And the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. September unfolded, the summer unfolded into fall. And all the leaves of all of those oak trees, they turned colors and they fell to the ground. But the leaves of Alexandra's tree remained fresh, bright summer green. Then fell the first snowfall of winter. And that morning a white eagle circled the forest, circled the tree, and landed on Alexandra's shoulder. The eagle whispered to Alexandra, "Oh, my darling Alexandra, I am the spirit of Princess Charlotte. You have mourned for me long enough. Give your sorrow to me. Find your space, your nothingness, and in that space, ask a question that will let you live again, live again, live again." The eagle flew to the top of the tree, and on that bitter cold morning, Alexandra's breath was puffs of white. But as she breathed out her sorrow, those puffs of white turned lavender and then purple. And they wafted up, and they wove themselves in between the feathers of the outstretched wings of the eagle. And Alexandra's breath turned white again. The eagle let out a great cry, and all of the green leaves of that tree began to shake, and the leaves popped up one by one, and they fluttered down onto the bed of snow. And Alexandra, deep in her meditation, she found her space, that nothingness. And in that space, her icicle hair fell away, and her red hair returned. She opened her eyes after all those months, and she saw a white eagle flying bits of purple in its wings. And she looked out and saw green leaves on white snow. And with hope and joy in her heart, she asked a question. What's next for me? What's next?
Thank you, Gretchen, and Katie, and Maura, and Stephen. And we're going to take an intermission now for 10 minutes, so go and keep Christopher busy. And we'll be back with new storytellers for the second half. So thanks a lot. Second half storyteller, and well, first of all, our musician, Katie. Yay! And we're going to have two storytellers the second half here. The first one is Juliana Persons. She of the beautiful hair. And Franz van der Horst. Franz.
Okay, I've got two songs. I was told to give you one song to subdue you from your break, and another song to lead you in to the next story. So this is the subduing one. Everyone settle down. This song is actually about, remember the 15-degree weather last year? Like this time last year? I'm from the West Coast, so I was like, wow, that's cold. How did it feel when the wind came? 15 degrees in Portland. We all stayed inside. I couldn't trust I'd be useful again. I'll be relevant. I wanna be known like the sandals in the back of your closet. The snowy patio. How does it feel to be important? In one breath you ruined my whole year. I can't trust I'll be lovely again. I'll be beautiful. I wanna be kept like the sandals in the back of your closet. clothes in the back of your closet. The snowy patio.
Thank you. This is a cover, and it's super depressing.
We haven't been the same, you know, since we buried you below on that still winter day. And the plot you picked out so many years ago, when you laid your wife in her grave. Bring me back to autumn, or lead me on to May. I'm not ready to take the helm, abandoned on your dying day. Played them a reverie, and that's just fine with me. If the crows sit and caw, how cold and deep the freeze seals our every home, even after the thaw. Bring me back to autumn, or lead me on to May. I'm not ready to take the helm, abandoned on your dying day. If I could hear it turn, if I could never learn to fill the void, as they say. Grateful I have this earth to channel you in my hands, feel your force in a way, and it'll bring me back to autumn, or lead me on to May. I'm not ready to take the helm, abandoned on your dying day, and it will bring me back to autumn, or lead me on to May. I'm not ready to take the helm, abandoned on your dying day. Your dying day, your dying day.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Katie. I'm Juliana Person, and I've got a personal story for you called 7 Autumns Without a Spring. Have you ever watched a leaf get caught in a fall breeze, where it swoops and swirls and goes on and on, off into the distance, never getting any closer to the ground? And it makes you wonder how far it might go, what it might see, and if it's possible that it might just never stop. I kind of wanted to be that leaf. And for a while, I sort of was. I got my degree in enology, wine science, and like many people, began my wine industry career with seasonal work. It is a pretty neat feature of the wine industry that almost every winery needs extra help during the harvest season in the fall. And it's a neat feature of this planet where we live that the seasons in the southern hemisphere are opposite those in the northern hemisphere. So just as winter is setting in And wineries on one half of the world are letting all their seasonal workers go. Wineries on the other half are hiring. It's not uncommon for people to harvest hop, working seasonally at different wineries in different places, flipping back and forth between the hemispheres to live in an endless fall. I was so excited when I found out about this career option. Travel the world making wine absolutely signed me up. My first harvest, I worked in Sonoma, California, but my first overseas harvest was in Australia. I was surprised when I first got there that the landscape looked fairly similar to what I knew of the California wine country. Hills with dried grass and scattered trees, lots of vineyards. It didn't feel nearly as foreign as I was expecting, except for the baffling Australian slang. Grab your togs and the esky. It's piss up down at the beach this Avro. What? Apparently that meant I needed my bathing suit and an ice chest for drinks on the beach in the afternoon. The other real difference was that instead of needing to be on the lookout for deer, we would often come around a bend to find a kangaroo in the middle of the road, sometimes a whole mob of them. The locals would get a little annoyed, but I loved it. Seeing a kangaroo was definitely the highlight of my commute to work. I would carpool with 2 coworkers who were also my roommates for the season, and this was because many seasonal workers buy a car when they arrive in a new country. But buying a car is a hassle even at home. And in a new country, you have to figure out the different traffic laws and how insurance works there, which is always a bit different. And there's just so many moving pieces. As these Aussies would say, yeah, nah, mate, you're dreaming. No, thank you. The smallest winery that I ever worked in my harvest hopping days was in South Africa. They only hired 3 additional workers for the season, 2 South African guys and me. They gave us accommodation in a cottage on the property. When I first arrived, I was cheerfully informed that when they'd been getting the cottage ready for us, they had found a Cape Cobra in the room that I was going to be using. I very diligently checked under my bed every single night for large venomous snakes, but thankfully none showed up. This winery lent me the use of their box truck on Sundays when the winery was closed, so that I could go into town and get groceries and do a bit of sightseeing. I toured some local wineries my first couple days off, and then worked up some courage to venture into Cape Town. I needed to work up that courage because I can be a bit of a nervous driver at the best of times. And in South Africa, they drive on the left side of the road, which is a little different. And this box truck was a manual transmission, which I'm okay at, but not 100% confident. And they loaned me a navigation device, but it only gave directions in Afrikaans. Plus, this truck was big. Too big to fit in a parking garage. So when I got to Cape Town, I was driving around and around downtown, holding my breath at any tight corners, searching for an open air lot so I could park this thing. When I finally found one, I just left the truck there all day and used a bus to get to the different sites. It ended up being a great day sightseeing, but the hassle of getting that big truck in the city meant I could save any further Cape Town adventures for the winter when harvest was over. The largest winery where I ever worked was in New Zealand. This winery operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The fruit would come in giant dump trucks that could unload more than 30 tons of grapes in a matter of minutes. This winery would do in one day more than double what my South Africa winery could do in an entire season. They brought in 50 extra workers for harvest from more than 20 different countries. They provided a bus to get us to work and helped arrange housing for us at a backpacker hostel. This backpacker hostel had a really summer camp kind of a feel. There were dorms, 2 to a room, a bathhouse where we would insert a coin into the shower for 4 minutes of hot water, after which it would turn ice cold, and kitchen blocks, where we usually would cook our own meals, but sometimes would band together for communal dinners, the best of which was when Lorenzo from Italy commandeered all 6 ovens to make dozens and dozens and dozens of pizzas. That hostel had parties and games and a lot of summer romance, or not summer, but fall romances going on. And it was just an absolute blast to be there. I loved this whole lifestyle. Always seeing new places, always meeting new people, learning new things. I was always on the hunt for my next job. From end of summer, fall, beginning of winter, over and over and over again. I'd just visit my parents' house twice a year to unpack, repack, and move on to my next destination. California, Australia, California, New Zealand, Oregon, South Africa. I never wanted this to end. But in my late 20s, I had some health issues. And that meant that insurance became a pretty big priority. I'd also promised my mom that I would strongly consider settling down when I was around 30. So that was the end of that. I really was feeling down the first time that I stayed all the way through till springtime. I was so bummed that I was missing the Southern Hemisphere harvest. But then spring flowers started to appear. Blossoms on the trees lining the streets. Daffodils and tulips in people's flower beds. Daisies and dandelions and random patches of grass everywhere. There were so many colors. And there were baby lambs in the fields and ducklings. I'd forgotten all about ducklings. They are so cute. I really missed being that leaf floating in the breeze. Whenever I hire seasonal workers, now that I am a lab manager at a winery in Oregon year-round, I get super nostalgic. But being in one place allows for more community, it allows for relationships, it allows me to own things that don't fit in a backpack. I am no longer a leaf floating in a breeze, but I am an established plant with roots, ready for any season.
This is my last song, not the end of the night. I wrote this song a really long time ago. It was the first or second time I was coming back to Oregon from California, and I was afraid of the winter ahead of me because it's kind of gnarly. No time to brush off the mud on my shoes. The blank windows and the months ahead. Your gray winters last until May. So I let the salt dry on my face. Maybe I'll be strong enough. Oh, don't count on it. Memos following the sun, high by a
Since when was I afraid of too many faces? Since when did I call this home? Where moody winters last until May, till I let the salt off of my face. Maybe I'll be strong enough, oh, don't count on it. Mammals following the sun, I bought a lamp instead, bought a lamp instead. Who do I want to be after all this wandering? I can't see past the trees when it never stops raining. Who do I want to be after all this wandering? I can't see past the trees when it never stops raining.
Thank you.
My name is Frans van der Horst, and I brought something with me for you to see. It's an old turtle shoe. When I see this one, it brings back memories of a long time ago, 80 years ago. And I would like to share with you some of my first memories. I'm pretty sure that a few people will say, come on, this is terrible. How is it possible that parents will give something that bad to their own flesh and blood? You can get something much better from any second-hand store, important. Yes, you can do that here. But I was born in an occupied country during the Second World War. And when my oldest sister had outgrown this shoe, the other is in Holland, the other shoe, my parents must have said, it is war. And we didn't get any ration coupons to buy shoes. Let's save them for her baby sister. And when my baby sister had outgrown this shoe, my parents must have said, it is still war, and we will never be able to get shoes. Let's save them for their baby brother, which was me. So I'm the third person who crawled in this shoe. To some of you, this shoe means parents who didn't love their children. To me, the same shoe means my parents loved me very much. And I hope they will hear me when I say, dank u wel, papa and mama. I was still walking, trying to walk in this shoe, exactly 80 years ago. So the winter 44, 45. Now remember, You probably don't know that, but the northern part of Holland was still occupied by the Nazis. The southern part had been liberated by the Allies. D-Day worked very well, but the Allies were halted at the Rhine River. Remember the movie A Bridge Too Far, Battle of Arnhem. Project Market Garden was not very successful. The northern part stayed occupied by the Nazis. And there was a railroad strike, so no more fuel, no more coal was brought into the country. No more food was brought into the country. And the winter of 44-45 was very, very cold. And there was not enough food. People did indeed eat tulip bulbs and sugar beets. We call this in Holland the hunger winter because thousands of people died. But then finally, April 1945, the Allies received permission by the Nazis to drop food for the starving people in Holland. I remember it very well. I was in bedroom on the second floor and I saw my mother standing in the backyard waving with a big white bedsheet to an airplane that came straight at us, flying very low, his engine roaring, and bombing doors open, out of which no bombs, but food fell like manna from the heavens. And a few days later, the capitulation papers were signed and Holland was free and united. May the 5th, 1945, Liberation Day. Of course, you have to celebrate a Liberation Day, but there was nothing to celebrate with. The country had been robbed, destroyed, but with the manna from the heavens, we also got a little bit of sugar. And my parents knew that all children love sweets. So we celebrated Liberation Day with a little bit of sugar on a Dutch teaspoon. And Dutch teaspoons are very small. And every year on the May the 5th, we got a little bit of sugar to remember that we were free. Now, as it so happened, exactly 30 days after Liberation Day, I celebrated my birthday. And next to us lived a family, and they had a 17 or 18-year-old girl, and she fell in love with one of those Canadian soldiers who had liberated us. And that soldier was stationed pretty close, and he fell in love with her, and I don't know why he did it. My hunch is he loved her so much that they got married and she moved with him to Canada. But when he heard that I would celebrate my birthday in a free country, he went back to his outfit and organized a birthday cake for me. 3 layers, because I was 3 years old. I don't think that my parents, in their wildest dreams, could have imagined a few weeks earlier that they would celebrate and eat Canadian cake. Now, of course, they encouraged me to do something too, and I was first a little bit afraid of the soldier because he had a tattoo on his arm, and I had never seen a tattoo, and I was a little bit scared of him. But how old was he? 3 years old. I walked towards him and I climbed on his lap and I kissed him. And the soldier, who had been trained to kill people, because that's what soldiers do, they kill people, he became shy and didn't know what to do with me anymore. Now, unfortunately, I cannot remember the taste of the cake, but I do remember the taste of the milk powder that he brought. That came in cans. They were, I think, pale yellow and white with black letters. And on top of it was a key soldered. And you could break that key off. And on the side of the key was a little lip. And you put the lip in the key and you turn the key, and then while turning the key, you peeled off a metal band, and that way you open the can. And inside was milk powder. Not that instant stuff that you get here. No, this was whole milk powder. That was very fine, dense, difficult to dissolve, and it tasted heavenly. Unfortunately, although I have to say now, fortunately, we also had to take cod liver oil. I mean, yeah, some of you laugh. I get goosebumps when you think of it. Terrible. But we had to take it because it was life-giving. But my father told me that when you don't smell the cod liver, then it tastes less bad. So my two sisters and I remember that so well, standing in the dining room with our noses pinched and getting a tablespoon of that slippery, slimy stuff. Awful. But then afterwards, we got a little teaspoon of creamy, old-fashioned, whole milk powder. Oh, that was so nice. And as I said, it was difficult to dissolve. So sometimes, half an hour later, you still could find something in between your teeth. Ah. Now, I had told Kathy, my wife, the story. And one day I came home from work. We were living in Milwaukee, not far from here. And I got out of the car, and Kathy is waiting for me on the front porch and said, come into the house. I bought you something. You will like it. So I went with her into the house, and there in the kitchen area, she said, now you have to close your eyes and open your mouth. And then she gave me a little spoonful full of that old-fashioned creamy milk powder. And as soon as I tasted that, I started to weep because it brought back all those bittersweet memories of growing up in a poor but loving family. And I remember the words of St. Paul, who told us to be thankful under all circumstances. And from his seminary days, the words of the German mystic Meister Eckhart, who said, if the only prayer you say in your whole life is, thank you, that would suffice. I think they try to tell us that not cleanliness, but thankfulness is close to godliness. Where you're thankful, an old shoe will remind you of the love of your parents. And a little teaspoon with sugar will remind you that you are free. And dry milk powder, it becomes a feast.
Thank you, Franz. That was so beautiful. So I just want to ask all the storytellers to come on back up to the stage for a final bow. Laura, Steve.